Well, good afternoon, folks. We'll go ahead and get started here.
Well, I think we
Got a few more people trickling in. Glad to have you guys here. We understand that this is kind of the black sheep topic of the day, but we hope you'll enjoy it anyways. We've been looking forward to this. So we'll be presenting on our efforts in modeling the nickel plate and Lego. It was working. There it is.
There we go.
We'll cover a few different things. We realize, again, being kind of an interesting topic for a lot of people, we'll dive into the history of Lego trains and dive into the hobby, and then kind of get a little bit more specific as the presentation goes on. Different modeling theories, what different people do with Lego, what Nick and I do, our processes, and showcase a couple of the models that we built towards the end of the presentation. And hopefully we'll have time for questions at the end. There is a lot to talk about. But before we get into that, just to introduce ourselves, I'm Glenn Holland. I'm 28 years old. I'm a mechanical engineer in the rail industry in the Pittsburgh area. I'm a lifelong railroad hobbyist. In addition to working full-time in the rail industry as a mechanical engineer, I'm part-time at the Age of Steam Roundhouse Museum, which are the owners and proprietors of Nickel Plate S2 763. And I'm an occasional volunteer at the Fort Wayne Railroad Historical Society when I have the free time, which is dwindling. But I've been modeling with Lego, I would say, in a serious effort since I was 11 years old, so you do the math. It's about 17 years. I've got a number of Lego achievements under my belt, community movements, including the foundation of Brick Model Railroader in early 2017, which is a community hub and instructions production company. We sold instructions for some of the custom models that we made. In addition to writing articles on of technical nature, how-to articles, and highlight articles of what people are doing in the hobby and things like that. Helped co-found the Brick Train Awards during the COVID lockdowns to bring people together in an online space. While we couldn't go out of our homes, we founded the Brick Train Awards for that, which is an annual event. I've had a hand in producing custom kits and instructions for different models. I've also built models on commission for several people. And if you've seen the TV show Lego Masters, which I believe is on the Fox network, I was solicited to be on that show twice. Twice for season 1 and once for season 2. In addition to having built award-winning scratch-built prototype models. Is most of what I do in my free time.
And then I just want to introduce myself. Nick Dombi. I'm from East Toledo. Actually grew up about a mile from Ironville Yard. Actually grew up right between the Toledo Terminal and the Wheeling and Lake Erie Beltline. My background definitely comes from my family. I grew up with my grandfather giving me that interest in trains, and having trains constantly go past my backyard got my interest pretty much from the day I came home from the hospital. And I'd always known that we had Penn C, Penn Central, Conrail, and CSX, his path. That was what I knew. And then I think, like Wayne and Gary spoke this morning about how the day 759 came to Fort Wayne, I had a very similar experience in 2012 when 765 came to Toledo for the employee specials. And that was the moment that everything sort of just awoken. It was like, whoa, we're going to go check this out. And my grandfather took me to Homestead Yard past the cemetery, and he'd never taken me through that cemetery, and he says, this is where your great-grandfather, Charles Swanson Sr., was buried. He worked on the Wheeling and Lake Erie. What? I never knew that. So that started to pique my interest in the Nickel Plate Road, and that's what sent me on a rabbit hole that's been going on 12 years now. Since then, I've spent, I don't even want to know how many hours trackside chasing 765 and then other nickel plate preserved equipment around the Midwest area. But I have started volunteering at the Fort Wayne Railroad Historical Society every now and then, particularly with our freight car restoration, which is ongoing. We have a few other guys on that job who are with us today. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here for the Legos. And I started playing with Lego trains when I was a kid because, you're growing up, you're a kid, you see the Legos, you buy them, you build them, you have a good time. And they made some train sets, which Glenn will get into. And I made from spare parts my own custom trains when I was a kid. And then high school came and it kind of fell out, dropped off. Then on a whim, in late 2018, I just was like, hey, I remember reading Rail Bricks, an old online magazine that was the state of the Lego hobby around 2010. I wonder if that's still active. And started looking up what Lego train people were doing today, and it was, oh my goodness, look at all this. I couldn't believe what they were doing, and I wanted to get in on that. And the first model that I built was a bay window caboose number 423 that's preserved at the Mad River and Nickel Plate Road Railroad Museum in Bellevue. And that went on to win an award for the 2021 Brick Train Awards. And I met Glenn around the same time. We've been firm friends ever since. We're both same age, and our vested interest in the Nickel Plate Road has just skyrocketed our models to what we have to present for you today. I'm also a member of Mishlug. That is the Lego user group. These are guys that will exhibit shows. There's like Lego conventions that are very much like train shows where you'll have displays, layouts running, and they use a modular system. So I was in Fort Wayne last week breaking in the GP30 that's over there on the table that we'll talk about later today. But I think we need to get into the history of Lego trains so we can kind of understand how we got to where we are. So I'm going to hand that back to Glenn.
A lot to talk about with that, for sure. So, a brief history of Lego trains. This be a little bit more detailed than you think. So, we start off in the 1960s, believe it or not. Lego's first trains were made in the mid-1960s is what we call the 4.5 volt era, 4.5 volt, which is the voltage of the batteries that they ran on. These were battery powered back in the day. And there are multiple offerings available. We've got pictures of them, some of them here. Kind of the earliest is up in the top left here and a little bit more later on down towards the right. But you can see the kind of mentality that Lego had towards trains. You could buy a single locomotive, you could buy a single, I guess that's a boxcar or something equivalent, or you could buy the full set, battery powered set with the motor and everything like that. Again, very rudimentary, but again, it's just the starting point. But we see that a lot of things were defined by Lego at this time, chief of which is the gauge of the track, which is nominally about, I guess, 60 millimeters, about 5 studs. So we'll use the term stud a lot as a measurement. A stud is about 8 millimeters. It's basically the bump on the top of the Lego. That's called the stud. But we still use the track gauge today, and also define the use of the magnetic couplers. On regular Lego sets, that's what they use in the modern day as well. Continuing on a little bit into the 1970s, we see kind of a greater number of offerings, more cars and locomotives, caboose that you can build into a number of different items there, passenger car and mail van. We have the 90-degree crossover, for example, and a central train station. They really start to expand on their offerings in the 1970s. Moving into the 80s, we really pick up speed. This is what we call the 12-volt era. Coming off of the battery-powered 4.5-volt system, we now move into track power with 2 metal rails between the plastic outer rails. You can kind of see it here. Similar to Lionel, but it's 4 rails in total as opposed to 3. But again, you can see the design mentality with the Lego sets. You have the full sets here, intercity passenger train. You have the big steam engine, individual freight cars, freight depot and things like that. Mix and match, build whatever you like out of that. And again, we also see that this is backwards compatible with previous offerings. Again, keeping with the track gauge and the magnetic couplers and everything like that. And again, we build upon that, no pun intended, into the 21st century as time goes on. This is typically what we refer to as one of the golden years of Lego trains. The 12-volt system, which unfortunately was never available in the United States, really had a lot to offer, and these highlight some of those offerings. Back in the day, in the 1980s, with this 12-volt system, we had remote control switches, RC turnouts. We had remote control signals that were both lit and would deactivate the power to the rails. So you would press this red button here and it would cut the power to those rails until you press the green button and the train would continue on. You wouldn't have to touch the speed controller. And you could also build a remote functioning crossing gate here. You got a little motor here which connected to a gear which would raise and lower the crossing arms by activation of a similar style button there. Again, this is considered some of the best years of Lego trains just for these play features, just unfortunately both before our time and never available in the United States, which makes this pretty valuable for collectors. But you can see that Lego really did put a lot of effort into this several years ago. Moving into the 1990s, this is where things start to pick up for both Nick and myself. This is what we start to remember seeing back when we were much younger in the catalogs and things like that. We move into the 9-volt system, so again, we move from the 2 metal inner rails to just 2 rails in total that are powered just, you know, pretty much like any typical model train that you would have today. Still keeping with the same track gauge, but redefining the power system. The 9-volt era is one of the more iconic eras in the Lego train history, and again, you can see the mentality of, you know, different cars and locomotives, both available separately and full sets, and things like that. You have some of the most iconic Lego trains ever made, including the Metro liner here, which is sort of Amtrak inspired with the red, white, and blue stripes there. Some of the most well-designed and most well-remembered sets in history. And I had to put this one in on the side. This is the 4561 Railway Express. That was my first set on Christmas in like 2002 or something like that, so I had to put that one in there.
Now that was my first set,
yeah,
but it was green.
That's right. So in the 2000s, we keep with the 9-volt era finally, where we found a little bit of traction with that, but the expandings are even, the offerings are even farther expanded. You have different levels of sets. You have the express set with the steam engine and the passenger car. You have the deluxe express set with the log car, the passenger car, and the caboose in addition to the engine. And you can also do things like buy the small version of the steam engine and choose to build a tender or not, and the same thing with the large engine. And you could also build or order those in 5 colors. Black, I think it was black, green, blue, brown, and gray, I believe. Which, so you could have a number, you know, a fleet of locomotives essentially, built to the same design, different colors, and uniquely verifiable, except they would all be numbered number 317 just because they didn't give you enough stickers to renumber them. But more offerings, including individually available cars, a tank car, hopper car, and caboose, keeping with the tradition. Again, the track gauge is maintained, but these are the real collectible ones. If any of you folks ever find one of these, let me know, I'll buy it from you. Lego actually offered a Santa Fe F unit and a BN GP38 in the 2000s under this 9-volt system, and along with those offered TTX intermodal cars and 2 versions of stainless steel or stainless steel inspired streamlined passenger cars to go along with that F unit. And again, some of the most iconic sets that they ever made, and you can see that Lego really did put some real effort into being realistic, or at least giving you the illusion of realism in what you got.
How good we had it.
We really didn't. Nick and I were too young to appreciate it at the time. But they really did put a lot of effort into this. Now, moving away from the 9-volt era, this is kind of the big event in Lego trains. They moved from the powered metal rails to plastic rails and battery control, which is essentially what we're doing here. This is the remote control era. They only had 2 sets in this offering, which included this giant one-piece base here that you would have to build around, which included this sort of cartridge for AA batteries that you would put inside. For what it's worth, these were very good sets, but kind of limited in what you could do with them, given you have this giant piece, and it would pretty much only lend itself well to a diesel locomotive and things like that. But we finally have the departure from the track-powered system into battery and remote control systems, which is essentially where we've stayed today. And that continues to be the case moving into the Power Functions era. Power Functions is kind of a catch-all name that we use for Lego's robotics, motors, and infrared control and things like that, which is essentially what Nick and I are using today, or at least some flavor of that. Lego offered the Emerald Knight in 2009. That was a groundbreaking set because it was the first time that a Lego train ever had accurate locomotive drive wheels and connecting rods. They also, in the same era, introduced the Maersk branded train with quite a nice Jeep 40 style diesel, and also the TGV inspired high-speed electric train there on the bottom left. But this is really important because we can see that Lego put even more effort into it. They wanted to give more realism and allow for both adults and children in kind of that middle market, which they called Lego Direct, which was people between kind of like 18 and 30 or something like that, to have something that was more realistic but still had the playability factor that Lego sets have. And then moving farther beyond that, it starts to kind of run together. We have the different versions of Power Functions in which we pretty much reduce the offerings from the train line into two things. We have a passenger train and a freight train. So for example, the red passenger train here was out at the same time as that yellow freight train up in the top left. The white one came out at the same time as that red one. And then they kind of just do that. They redo them every 4 or so years. The playability is still there. Of course, with these freight sets, you get, the vehicles and the gantry crane and things like that. But, the offerings start to decline significantly. Unfortunately. And now we have a Bluetooth style control, which is still battery powered. And you can connect a dedicated remote to a dedicated battery piece on the locomotive. But again, you still see the same offerings of one freight train, one passenger train, which is kind of unfortunate. There is still some playability factor there, but again, the offerings are have kind of shrunk into this just two baseline offerings. But there are a couple of interesting exceptions to that, which include the Disney train and station. It's a Walt Disney World themed steam locomotive there on the top left, the Swiss Crocodile here in the top middle, and the Orient Express, which is this nice blue steam locomotive and train, of course branded for the Orient Express, which ran between Paris and Istanbul. Very nice sets, again geared a little bit more towards adults, collectors. I mean, you can put Disney on anything and it'll sell very quickly. And things like that. But again, being a little bit more realistic in the offerings, and things like this typically are very well received. Very much tends to be a vote with your wallet kind of thing. If you want to see Lego produce more train sets, it's oftentimes a good thing to buy the train sets that they make. So that's the hopefully abridged history of Lego trains, and now we start to dive a little bit more into the hobby side. So Lego has already, as always, been well aware of what hobbyists are doing, and they've always made some efforts at different times to incorporate that. This picture here is an example of what was called the hobby train set, which came out in the late 2000s. They actually had a group of, I forget how many individuals, but people from across the world go to a workshop that they hosted in their factory in Denmark to kind of workshop the pieces that were available and maybe kind of create some new pieces and think, what can we really build with what we have if we bring people who do this for a hobby in and see what they can do? And they came together and created a number of models, 30 of which were put into this set. The set gave you the parts to build any, 1 or 2 at a time of those offerings, which was really interesting at the time. They've also hosted private community discussions. I was a part of one of those in 2020. But going even farther from that, we have a lot of people like Nick and I, and in some cases, which choose to do a number of different things with the parts that Lego gives us. There are a lot of different mindsets that people use in modeling Lego, and I've kind of put it on a spectrum here to give you an idea. On the far left there, you get less custom and more stock, if you will. So we have people that will just use the stock Lego sets and build those and operate those and enjoy that. Nothing wrong with any of this, of course. It's just what you like to do. We have people going a little bit more towards the fully custom side that will modify Lego sets and operate those and enjoy that. We have even a little bit further people who will do purist modeling, which is essentially not modifying parts or painting things in any way and not using too many custom things, which I call mild custom modeling, but still done with prototype modeling in mind in a lot of cases. And then on the far right end of the spectrum, going fully custom, you have prototype accurate scale modeling, which is what I claim to do in a lot of cases. And we have examples of that. And you can work in a multitude of different scales. What Nick and I tend to do is about 1/46, which is very close to O scale. And this is just one example that Nick and I will dive into here in a little bit. There is no right or wrong way to use Lego. There's no right or wrong way to model your favorite modeling interest. This is just what we have decided that we like to do. So we use, oftentimes you'll hear terms like 6 wide and 8 wide, which refer to the studs. 6 wide, so 6 studs wide is typically the width of a stock Lego train set, especially with things like the Santa Fe Super Chief F3 locomotive that we saw. 8 wide is what a lot of custom builders will do. You add 2 studs and it gets a little bit easier to add detail and be a little bit more prototypical and accurate. And again, that 8 wide scale translates into about 1/46 for us, so 8 studs or 64 millimeters is equivalent to roughly 10 feet, which allow us to define scale lengths and measurements and things like that. One of the things that I found is scale is a good starting point for modeling with Lego. I found with cases in my modeling that if I set the exact scale length and then model it about 1 scale foot too high, it starts to look really good. If I model it the exact scale height, it looks a little bit too squished and short, which is just one of the things that you learn. But then I have to remember to do that with everything that I build, or it starts to look a little weird. So it gets a little interesting. And we are aware that this is kind of opposes theories like 2-rail low scale and Proto-48 and some traditional scale models. But again, that's one of the nuances of building. It's kind of that same theory of selective compression and artistic license that anybody who will model anything is well familiar with. So as examples of that spectrum, we have people who will use the stock Lego sets, and I put the Orient Express here to exemplify that. Again, a very good example, and that's a current offering from Lego. Moving farther down that spectrum, we have people who will modify Lego sets. This is an example of somebody who took that Disney train here, it's on the top of this photograph, and modified it into a slightly more accurate American 19th century 440 locomotive. This is done by a gentleman, Andrew Harvey from England. We have people who will do purist or mild custom modeling. This is an example of a Père Marquette 1225 done in 2009. Done by Tony Sava, very well known and respected member of the Lego modeling community. And then his second attempt, or however many, attempt at doing that again in 2024 with 15 years of experience, 15 additional years of experience under his belt at the time. And you can see the transition between what we did in 2009 to what you're able to do in 2024 with the new parts that Lego has made, and also just going a little bit farther across that spectrum with some custom parts and things like that. And then you have the prototype accurate scale modeling, which is what Nick and I like to call ourselves. And to exemplify that, I have a photo of my New York Central L2A Mohawk number 2791, which I built here. I built during 2020, referencing the original drawings that Alco made to build those for the New York Central in the mid-1920s, and a photo of a real L2A there on the far left. So you can do a lot with Lego, and it's all about what you want to do. It's how much you want to do, and how far you're willing to push that envelope. I like to push that envelope very far, but again, no matter where you fall on the spectrum, there is no wrong answer, of course. So to dive in a little bit more specifically, Nick and I have both prepared examples of case studies of our modeling processes from start to finish, and I'll exemplify mine with 763. Of course, we're all here for the nickel plate. So I started with, before I put any parts together, I started with research. Research is one of my favorite parts of any modeling topic. I like learning this information a lot. It's always the first step for me, and I find out what I don't know, and then I find out where to find out what I don't know. So for me, that tends to be a lot of books. Berkshires of the Nickel Plate Road by Kevin J. Holland. I'm not related to him, by the way. Fantastic book. One of the best books that I've ever read on the topic. Well written, very good technical information as well. Historic diagrams, things like this are always useful as well. Online forums, and of course the Nickel Plate Historical and Technical Society with their extensive information online is nothing but useful to people like Nick and myself. Moving on from that, I kind of do a feasibility and goal setting and requirement study. I always define performance goals, so we all familiar with the Nickel Plate 700s. They looked good, they ran fast, and they pulled a lot. That's what I wanted to do with mine. So there are a lot of nuance and things that I have to do with a model to achieve those goals. That comes down to how I want to set up the motors, how I want to set up the gearing, how I want the locomotive to move under its own power, things like that. Whatever other features I want to be sure to capture. For example, on the Mohawk, they used Baker valve gear as well, so I had to figure out how I wanted to represent that, had to figure out the feed water heater in the front, a number of different things like that to really kind of capture the look and sell the idea of what I'm presenting to the viewer. You know, I want to say this is a New York Central Mohawk, but I want that viewer to say, I agree, that's exactly what it should look like. And hopefully at least 2791 here does that. But all along this time, I'm thinking, what do I need to do to accomplish these goals? So I'm able to define those pretty clearly and then move down a path to start achieving that. I move into a basic layout. I've got a lot of photographs here that are taken from my computer screen. This is a design program called stud.io, or Studio is what kind of, it's more easy to say. It's kind of a parts library of Lego parts. I can pick up one of those and drag it around and rotate it, and it'll connect in the ways that Lego normally would, and things like that. There's also collision detectors and things like that. If I put parts too close together, it'll tell me. But I lay things out, use that scale, 8 studs to 10 feet, to determine things like the size of the wheels, the distances between the wheel centers and things like that, again, using that historic information that I found previously. I define things like how I want the gearing to be. This big gray piece here in the middle is one example of a Lego motor in that program, and it's connected to gears, so the motors drive the drivers in this case. Which in this case is a very good mix between speed and power. I've had 763 running occasionally throughout the weekend, and you'll hopefully agree with me that it can pull a lot. If you hold one of those box cars in your hand, it's significantly heavier than you think it is. So being able to pull 15 cars, which I can easily do with 763, is pretty impressive at that point. I move into throwing things together, as I call it. I take assemblies from other existing models. On the far left there is the digital copy of the Mohawk that I did. I did that in 2020. 763 came about in 2022. So I take assemblies and different things from other models, and I kind of start to mash them together in different ways until I start achieving the look and appearance of what I'm looking for. I'll show you a little bit more about that. But this is one of the advantages of digital design. I'm a mechanical engineer in my day job, of course, so I'm well familiar with CAD and CAD processes. And this allows me to, put things right next to each other and compare them visually rather than have to build it physically and build it one way, then I don't like that. Build it another way, then I forgot how I did it the first time if I don't like it the second time. So I like designing digitally a lot more for that reason. And I've got probably, 3 or 4 different computer files of drafts of 763, which I'll walk you through just a little bit, but that's part of my process, is the digital design. But I'm very big on proportions. It's one of the things that I mentioned, is that if you build a little bit too tall, it starts to look a little bit better than it does if you built it a little bit closer to the scale height. One of the things that I found out in 763 is that I had to offset the frame of the locomotive in a very non-typical way to achieve the look. So you see that right up here in the front of the locomotive on the pilot, I've got the air compressors and shield tucked in really close to the cylinders here. And on the bottom here, I spaced it out 1 stud farther, but I think that looks a little bit too far, so I split the difference on this, which you'll see here. But doing this digitally is much easier than doing it in physical form, because I can put this copy and this copy of the locomotive right next to each other on my computer screen and compare them visually, rather than have to do it in physical form and have to rebuild a lot in between. And again, several versions of this locomotive take shape. I'm changing one thing between this and this, another between this and this, another between this and this. And as the design process goes on, I'm always making copies and starting over in some cases, and doing things, redoing things, a lot of trial, a lot of failure, a lot of rebuilding and things like that. I put that photo in there just to exemplify how far that process can go sometimes. Pretty much all of these iterations of this locomotive here have just very slight changes in primarily the firebox, because we're all familiar with the 700s. They have this very distinct look to them. So anything that I do in Lego has to capture at least a portion of that appearance in order to get the viewer to agree that it looks like what I say it looks like. But after I kind of figure out the proportions, I start to fill in the gaps. A lot of internal structure in building a locomotive like this, a lot of internal structure to the boiler, the firebox, things like that, to allow me to get the right shapes. There are some cases where glue is inevitable. I'm one of those people who is willing to glue Lego. Some people will scream at me for that and whatever. But I'm willing to do that. And again, you can see I start to lay out things like the tender. I like to point out that tender in the back there, Nick actually sent me several years ago, and was partly used in designing my own. So thank you, Nick, for that. Also in this case, I look into how the sub-assemblies fit together. Like if I were to take 763 apart in front of you, the boiler and cab would lift off and the firebox would stay on the frame. So I would need to make sure that those two things will mate flat and flush and sit together as they should in real life, which tends to be a little bit difficult, but the computer program tends to not lie. So I'm very thankful for that. And again, that collision detector really tells you what you need to know. Moving farther beyond that, I start to fill in the details. Again, details will help sell any model. Things like the layout of the sanding lines, all of the piping on this side of the firebox, the fact that nickel plate 763 has 2 mechanical lubricators, 1 on each side of the locomotive, the yoke of the Baker valve gear, that iconic kind of triangular shaped piece that the valve gear operates behind that hangs off the crosshead, the arrangement of the pilot, the headlight, the Mars light in this case, those flying number boards, the sand dome, things like that. Those details help set a good model apart from a great model. in my opinion. And there is a lot of give and take. I don't model everything, but I tend to model what I see. And when something jumps out to me on a photo of a locomotive, I tend to throw it in there, because if it stands out to me, chances are it stands out to somebody else. A very good example of that is the rear rocker arms on the back of the trailing truck. One of the details that nobody has ever modeled on a Lego steam locomotive before, I threw that in there, as well as the cross member of the frame that those will interface with. And going from there, I move into the party tricks. I do a lot of custom work. These wheels and connecting rods and valve gear are all designed by myself and 3D printed through various means. Again, mechanical engineering, I'm familiar with the CAD work. So I was able to replicate each of the 4 drivers on the S2 in exacting detail. And I also modeled, it's not very well seen here, but I modeled the tandem rod between the 3rd and 4th axle. We're all familiar with the 700s. That main rod is forked on the main crank pin, and that tandem rod fits in between the fork and goes between number 3 and number 4 crank pins. And I also use KD knuckle couplers on my cars and locomotives. It's to replace that antiquated magnet. In this case, it gives a little bit easier of operating on layouts and things like that, and also is less expensive than those old magnets were, because Lego stopped making those magnets in the mid-2000s because they're a choking hazard, of course. But I also like to put party tricks in my models. If I were to open the sand dome on 763 right now, I've actually got real sand inside of the sand dome, but it's not just any sand. Working part-time at the Age of Steam Roundhouse Museum, I have access to the real 763, so one day in 2022, I climbed up there and took out a scoop full of sand from the sand dome to put in my model, so that is real sand from the real 763 in my model of 763 there. Moving to artwork, I have a friend named Cale Leapart who is used to do this for fun, and now has since been hired by Rapido Model Trains based in Canada, and does model train artwork for a living now. He does the vast majority, if not every single bit of artwork that I use for my models, and he'll send me these artwork maps. You can see that we replicate the builder's plate, all of the numbering and lettering on these. The superheater patent plates and things like that are all represented properly. We go through this extensively. There's probably anywhere between 1 and 4 drafts of artwork before it gets put onto the final model. But speaking of that final model, putting it all together, testing, presentation, and publishing, making sure the locomotive will perform as intended, making sure that it'll run well, run smoothly, not break itself apart. Steam engines naturally want to break themselves apart as they operate. And putting all that together and presenting it to the public. I tend to be very particular in the ways that I publish my models. It's always Friday at 9 a.m. I write up posts and photos of maybe anywhere between 4 and 8 photos per model that I publish, all taken against a white backdrop there with a display track to up the wow factor. Because to me, it has a greater effect on somebody if I just say, hey, I did this, rather than show you the process from start to finish. I like to show the finished product rather than incrementally what I'm doing in a lot of cases, because it allows the viewer to take it all in at once, and I think it's a little bit more impressive. If I was on the outside looking in, which I have been before, and before I started to do this more seriously, I was always more impressed by, hey, here's all of the photos of the finished model, rather than I'm building up to this. It takes a little bit more of a wow factor in that case. And part of this finalization of the model and presenting it is the accompaniments and accessories. My friend Cale designed that 1000 series nickel plate caboose to accompany my 763 in this case. Nick, if you click that title there, it should bring us up to about a minute's worth of YouTube video of 763 in operation. So this was taken at the Amherst Model Railway Society show in November this year. So we're operating on a modular layout designed and built and very similar to the Fremo standard. Looks fantastic. Hotshot manifest freight. Except can be a little bit anachronistic because that's Point of Rocks, Maryland. I don't think nickel plate ever connected to Point of Rocks, Maryland, but we'll live with it for now. Similarly, that's Waterbury, Vermont. So,
and we're really getting around to that.
Yeah, not quite nickel plate territory, but helps to sell. The trains are the actors, the layout is the stage, if you will. I forget who said that, but I think that makes a lot of sense. But it gives you an idea of what other people like myself tend to enjoy doing. I do not have any layout modules yet, but those are in progress, and hopefully will be finished at some point. Now, I think that's everything I've got for 763.
All right, close off that tab. Do the. There you go.
There you go, perfect. And I'll hand it over to Nick, and he'll talk about some of his efforts.
All right.
That was a lot of speaking.
As someone who watched the whole process of 763 come together, I can really appreciate the process because I'm also doing models alongside with you. So, you know, I see your process, you see mine. But one of the problems I think we all face modeling the nickel plate road is that no model, no kit is ever perfect, dead on standard. And we have to kit bash, particularly with the GP30s, until Scale Trains releases the prototypically accurate versions, knocking on wood there, we're going to have to live with kit bashing Proto 2000 models or older ones to go with that. And it's a similar case with this Conrail GP30 that I started here probably about a year ago, started the ideas for this. This was a kit that was available by Brick Train Depot. They're one of the sellers that you can buy instructions from, and they'll give you a PDF to build the parts and get them yourself. So I had the fundamental question of, okay, I've got an ex-Pennsylvania Railroad GP30. How do I make it nickel plate? And there's the obvious big spotting difference, spotting items that you have, like the recessed bell and the nose. The dynamic brake fan and the intake grills had to be removed. And also that horn would have to be taken care of. Just covering that. Also the automatic train signaling box that is located right here on Pennsylvania Railroad models. Only though had to be removed and then figured out where we go from there. So the whole nose had to be rebuilt, and this is one of the beauty of working with Lego as the medium to build this, is that I don't have to worry about sanding and screwing up a nose and then sourcing another in case something breaks. You know, it's Lego. I can build it up, doesn't look quite right, change it. The headlight was moved onto the nose, and due to the offset, it sits just a little bit lower than it would on the prototype because it would sit halfway. But there are no existing parts that would cover that, so for right now, it is one of those eyeball models where you look at it and go, okay, that's good enough. Two of the big startling omissions that were in the kit itself was they did not include a cab interior. So I had to absolutely change that because I've been lucky to have some time in the cab of 901 down in the Lebanon, Mason and Monroe in Cincinnati, and you know, having pictures of the control stand, it's like, okay, I know what this should look like. You know, I can see the inside. I've got the image in my head that I need to translate with these bricks. Those were the quick mods that were made, along with moving the horn and then also adding the Motorola Firecracker antenna that was on EMD products at the time. Beneath the frame, that was one of the big things that completely changed up from the original kit. Thanks to the Historical Society's digitized archives, and particularly with the locomotive diagrams, you can realize that the frame that the Brick Train Depot kit had, the wheels were too far out, they were too wide, and it wasn't going to cut it for my eye, so we had to move those in by a step, and I wasn't entirely satisfied with the Blomberg B truck design, so I wound up redesigning that from the ground up as well as cutting down the fuel tank. That was something that was a little bit, not really touch and go, but since we're doing it on a computer system, you can make sure that you have everything ready, all your ducks are in a row for when you go to design it. And since our friend Cale is currently working at Rapido Trains, he's a busy guy, and I don't blame him. You know, if he's like, hey, I can't exactly expect to get a quick reply if I ask for decals to be made in a model. And my background is more not so much engineering, but videography, photography, and general flair for graphic design. So I took it upon myself to research research and make my own decals that I had a friend of ours print out, including figuring out the striping, what the right angle should be. One of my little favorite details on this particular model is that the builder's plate, and it's lost in translation on the print, but since I'm working with Vector and Adobe Illustrator where I can zoom in a near infinite amount of times, the builder's plate, the numbers on it are exactly accurate to 900. And I have 901 in the works, and the serial number will be changed in that reflection. But that's an example of kit bashing within the medium. Glenn is certainly the big kingpin when it comes to working on locomotives. My little measly diesel, by comparison, it's nice to look at, but the steam is what grabs the eye. But this guy can run for hours when it just comes to power. I would say it's as powerful as 763, and that's using standard Lego motors as well. But moving on to that, I think where I really cut my teeth was working on freight cars, and I'll have to ask you to bear with me on the workbench. This is my brother-in-law's skull with a spider on it. I'm painting for him. The rolling stock is kind of where I really got my start, particularly by studying the brick model railroader kits that you and Cale were making at the time, Glenn. And this was a Brickmania freight car that was sold around the same time as the Mohawk, and this was where I started to take those stock sets and modify them for myself. This was meant to accompany a Sherman tank on top, and being a boy from Toledo, I just said, no, it's got to have Jeep crates, because it's one of my kicks. Is I see models that have fully built Jeeps on the top of the flat cars, and it's like, no. When they were going overseas, they were in crates just like that. And this was done in about 2020, and that was kind of my first foray into doing graphic design work. But some of the cars and kits that we can build are stock. This is a stock brick model railroader, 55-ton hopper that was custom numbered for Cloverleaf 99105. Would have been 9105 in the Cloverleaf, and then the 90,000 suffix added for the nickel plate road. But that's an example of a kit that you can modify. And then the beauty of Lego is that you can take it apart and change it as times go on. It's not once you have a kit and you realize, you're really proud of it one day, then you look at it a few years later and you're like, I don't know, I could have done this better and I could have done that better. Well, that's the beauty of Lego, is that it can change. This was a kit that was done by Brick Model Railroader, Cale designed, of a Pullman standard PS1 boxcar, and the interior height initially was what you thought was scale at the time, if I have that right. But then as time went on and more people started to get into this Proto 48 aspect to scaling, they realized, wait, it's actually too tall. So this was an example of a good reduced design, and this particular model is 6769, which is preserved at the Mad River Nickel Plate Road Rail Museum in Bellevue, which kicks off a theme of the freight cars that I have here, which is working on preserved examples, because I consider these to be kind of touchstone cars. Because we don't even remember the nickel plate maintenance of way cars that would have been in service in NS in the 90s were all gone by the time we were even born. So our reference is purely the preservation era and what's left. So to be able to have those cars and be able to say, hey, I recognize that from a museum, and then lead that into more prototype specific models, I think that's a good way to get people who may not necessarily know the nickel plate road. That might get them to scratch just a little bit deeper. This particular boxcar is another example of kit bashing that can be done. This is a 1937 AAR type. This is about one plate lower. A plate is three of those make up a brick, and then that gets into the math of how we do these scales. But it's one plate lower than the previous boxcar to reflect that interior height change. And that's just that little detail, along with the B-end brake details, that I want to make sure that I have, because I look at models that are done by the high-profile O-gauge models, the beautiful ready-to-run cars that are available out, particularly by Rapido, Scale Trains, and Tangent are probably my main inspirations, because you look underneath and they have all the detail. And then I look and I say, okay, how much of this can I translate into these cars?
That one plate difference in height makes the difference between a 10-foot 6 interior and a 10-foot interior height.
Exactly.
Which is, luckily for us, that's very nominal.
It's extremely rare when the math lines up exactly how we need it to.
We like when it does.
Yeah. But I think probably the one freight car that I'm actually proudest of that I have here is the composite gondola that is in Bellevue. 70130 was an attempt to really, was my first attempt to raise the bar, and I wanted to have fully accurate brake detail. And I was looking at equipment diagrams and said, okay, this has got triple K brake valve. Okay, this is how the layout should look underneath it. And I'm not going to show the rather unflattering photo, but my wife accompanied me to the museum to do a research trip, and she was looking at something and comes back to me shouting and cussing underneath the gondola because, as it turns out, they switched it to a modern Westinghouse design some point in its career, and I had my model completely wrong. But we move on. I kept it to its original triple K because I like it better that way. You know the picture I'm talking about. But I think probably the thing that set me on the stage for L-gauge modeling, and I think what caught Glenn's attention, was my work on cabooses, and I have to thank Cale for taking care of the 1000 series, that way I don't have to get to it. But the Lake Erie and Western caboose 141, this was probably the first attempt that I had at a wood model caboose, and it was genuinely one that tells the tale of the evolution of a Lego model, because the original model that was designed in 2019 proportionally is close to what you see today, but the arch bar trucks were completely redesigned. The underframe detail has been completely redone. The interior, thanks to more colors being available due to Lego parts, was switched over from a tan and brown to the correct sand greenish and brown that comes with cabooses today. But as it stands, this is an evolution of where I would like to be at with my models, and I don't know if I'll be looking back at this and think, oh, maybe I can change this up. But right now, that's where we came with that. And then one of the things that I really want to hark home with, if you're ever interested in getting started with Lego, comes down to that bay window caboose, because that was the one that won an award. And this is how it started. And you can be honest, look at me and say, that's absolutely terrible. That looks nothing like the prototype. But I was proud of it. That was the thing at the time, I was proud of it, and I never stopped. I knew, okay, this was my first foray back into the hobby, was with that caboose. And I knew, probably could be better at the time, but that was the best I could do. And when it came time to rebuild it in 2021, it was completely stripped from every single part was taken off of it and rebuilt. And since it was vastly under scale, but it had the correct width, I had to add a lot of extra bricks. So all of the original caboose does live into its current successor, which did win the model. But it's one of those things that I look at it now, I'm happy with it, but when I go to build another one, I think I'm eyeballing 451 probably, I've got some changes I'm going to make to it, because it's always growing and changing. And that's the one thing that I absolutely love about the L-gauge community, is that it is provided me with that opportunity to take a look at, I can go out and buy a brass bay window right now, and I might not fully understand it, but I was always that curious little kid that asked why. Why does it do this? What's this brake rigging? You look at it underneath, and I just have to take somebody's word that it says it's right. Well, how does he know, and how should I know? And taking the time to research and develop these models and build them slowly, and just studying what is objectively mundane rolling stock and cabooses, that, the locomotives are the big ticket item, but that gives you that little bit more of appreciation. I think that they stand out particularly in crowds, because I think an average person, if you present them with a fine scale model compared to, say, an Athearn Blue Box, I think they can recognize, they can both say, okay, I don't know anything about trains, but I know that's the better one, just because they can tell that kit may have had the time and effort put into it. And it's definitely been shown in exhibiting at LEGO train shows and conventions that are in sheer disbelief at the models. Even this weekend, just having people go up and go, oh, these are O-scale. No, look at it again. And then just the eyes widen, sometimes the jaw drops, and it's just that little payoff that is just, it's so satisfying. It's just one of those things that just tells me that, okay, I'm doing something right here. And I think we're probably getting close to wrapping up here, and I genuinely want to thank Glenn for being a very close friend and being someone I can bounce ideas off of, or we'll just send a random screenshot and go, what do you think? Does this look right? No, change it.
It's all we talk about.
It's our group chat's just screenshot. Has this? No. And Adam, especially, I have to give you a heartfelt thank you for giving us the platform to even speak about this today, because I know we're a funny little niche hobby that is getting into model railroading, and I think it's a change in the norm, and I genuinely want to thank you for sitting in here and listening to us speak today, because it's different, and I hope you can at least appreciate where we're coming from with this and how much work and research and dedication we've put into these. I'm going to shut up and probably open this up to questions that you may have. Anything as I take? Sir.
So this is just a comment. I mean, it may be a niche, but it's actually not that much different from what we've all done, right? So I don't know how many of us have taken the old SP bay window caboose and slapped red paint on it and gray, a gray line. Red. Tony will tell you it's not white. It's actually light gray. You know, and done that, and then we look at it one day and say, that's not exactly right, and you get unhappy with it. So it's fascinating what you guys have done. It's really sort of unbelievable. I mean, I used to play with Lego, but not like this.
That's on our bingo cards.
Yeah, that was on our bingo. Check that one. And yeah, I really want to thank you for that comment, because there's a little bit of an online toxicity, because the internet's just always a hot dumpster fire. And there's a lot of gatekeeping that will go on where, that's not model railroading like I did. That's not, you didn't do this, and this. And it's like, what's wrong with it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But yeah.
It's just a different medium that you're doing it in.
Exactly.
It's model railroading.
Yeah. And hopefully,
it's modeling.
and if it gets people into it, I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, it's really expanded my own interest in the nickel plate, and certainly yours as well, since you have less of a connection to the railroad.
Yeah, I'm a little bit even farther removed from it. I don't tend to stick with one road. I love the nickel plate to death, and I've had a significant appreciation and understanding for them as I've modeled 763. I'm not saying I'm never going to not model nickel plate again, but I've got a lot more nickel plate to model now than I would. But it's kind of, for me, I just jump around a lot, but it's one of the things that I like to tell people is that whether we know it or not, anybody who models anything in whatever scale and whatever medium, we're all looking to represent the real world in an artistic way. And Lego is just a very interesting way of doing that, and it's a very relevant thing, because a lot of people will, probably most everybody here, in this room or otherwise, will be familiar with Lego in some way and have some touchstone to it, whether that's, they had it when they were kids, or played with it with their kids or their grandkids or whatever, and everybody has some connection to it, So presenting a, lifelike, so to speak, copy of a nickel plate bay window caboose and putting it next to, a lifelike Proto 48 model of the same thing. Not that one is more impressive than the other, but if you put them in front of two people who don't know trains, they'll always connect with the Lego one more, because they understand what Lego is. And again, that's not to say that the Proto 48 one is not impressive. I certainly have an insane appreciation for that.
Oh yeah.
Because both of them are 100% scratch built. It's the process of, getting that finest detail that you can reasonably get and putting it into your model. But people understand and know and appreciate what Lego is compared to, brass. And again, not that one is better or more impressive than the other, but people understand what you're doing.
And I don't think we're certainly the first Lego people to model the nickel plate road, but I think we're the ones that take it the most serious. And thankfully, our dedication is spreading. This is. Yeah, you guys haven't seen these because this came out last night. These are some of our
screenshots were posted in some communities or sent to us privately within the last 24 hours.
Wow.
On the top there is a brand new design rendering of a nickel plate PA.
Yeah, get the oil in here.
Then you have
Yeah.
right below it is the city of Toledo and city of Cleveland lightweight cars, and it's kind of thing that's community building. I mean, the guy on the top is a teenager from California. The guy on the bottom is probably close to Nick and my age, and he lives in the Denver area. So we're spread out all over. Everybody can find some appreciation for whether it's nickel plate or otherwise. But our meeting point is just the realism and the challenge of building with Lego and the payoff that comes with producing something realistic. So there are more of us.
We're out there.
Any other questions before we finally wrap up?
You guys killed it, man. You absolutely
Yeah.
killed it.
Thank you.
Absolutely killed it.
We appreciate it. Again,
It
we
would have
really,
really been killed dead if Nick had showed you the photo of him under the condo.
Oh no! No! No!